From a contemporary standpoint, it is all too easy to see the faiths and superstitions of our ancestors in cynical terms. How foolish were they to believe in such fables and lies which serve no purpose but to control them and to make them malleable? To us, it is almost a mystery. How could people possibly believe this nonsense? Well, today, much of the discourse surrounding the benefits of religion and religious beliefs focuses around the notion of religion as a provider of moral principles in the face of modern nihilism. But I would like to view the benefit of religion to the individual from a different standpoint, one which does not rely on a belief in an afterlife or salvation or any sort of mystical belief, but instead is predicated on the benefit of religion to the individual, not to the community in the form of moral principles. In my view, this is best represented by mysticism. So, what is mysticism? With our post-Enlightenment viewpoint, it is too easy to see mysticism as referring to a collection of ideas which were little more than a collection of vague lies. A different mode of being, an experience of being one with the universe. Such subjective and unprovable concepts are greatly offensive to our skeptical sensibilities. But let's give mysticism the benefit of the doubt briefly. What beliefs did mystics, a collection of similar thinkers belonging to a variety of faiths, actually hold? I would argue that the mystical tradition fundamentally, roughly believed the following. Number one, that there is a fundamental oneness to all things, or at least all created things. Number two, it is possible to experience this oneness through meditative practices. Number three, that the experience of this oneness is a positive and enjoyable one, and enriches our lives. All of these beliefs are fundamentally defensible and do not require belief in God, a prophet, or any other afterlife or higher power. I will now defend them one by one. Number one, that there is a fundamental oneness to all things, or at least all created things. Intuitively, this makes little sense. Of course, there are different things in the world. This mystical vagueness is clearly a bunch of wishy-washy nonsense, but really think about it. Take the claim seriously for a moment. In fact, many philosophers in the Western traditions have already done that. What constitutes a thing becomes much less clear the more you analyse it. What am I? Am I my head? Am I my brain? Am I my body? Am I my online presence? The reality is that these are all merely symbols that represent an idea of me, but where me begins and the outer world begins cannot be clearly defined. Likewise, what is this table? Are the air molecules on the table a part of the table? What even is the definition of a table? These questions have troubled philosophers for centuries, but ultimately there has been no satisfactory answer. And this, in my view, is because there is no answer. Our categories, table, self, computer, etc. are merely conventional. They are useful, but devoid of any true meaning beyond our own interest. So, if there is no clear, objective, true boundary between things, the logical conclusion is that all that exists can only be truthfully categorized as either belonging to one thing or being nothing at all. That is the only irreducible set of categories, and that is the fundamental belief of mysticism. Number two, it is possible to experience this oneness through meditative practices. So, leading on from point one, it becomes obvious that the categories we use to divide the world are the product of interest, a will to power, as Nietzsche would put it, or a pragmatic perspective, as other philosophers have put it. Much of our life consists of our concerns about the relation between these categories, and this is clearly because it is fundamental to the survival of the self. Our minds and our bodies have adapted through hundreds of millions of years of evolution to focus on this interest, to instinctually see the world in this way. It should then be obvious that simply knowing that our categories are arbitrary is not enough for us to actually experience or feel how it would be to view the world in such a way. The only way to do that is to detach ourselves from interest, the very thing that constructs our categories. And the only way to do this is through the practice of mindfulness meditation. Through mindfulness meditation, you let go of this voice of interest, simply disinterestedly viewing the world. This allows us to experience the oneness and emptiness of reality as simply a wave of experience. Number three, that the experience of this oneness is a positive or enjoyable one and adds perspective to our lives. For this section, I could easily refer to the countless thousands of people throughout history who have proclaimed the liberating and joyful nature of this experience to the point of dropping often materially successful or hedonistically fulfilling lives to pursue this feeling of oneness further. However, I think it is better to view the benefits of this experience from a modern perspective. In an industrial or post-industrial society, we are more entangled in interest than we have ever been. We see consumer goods advertised virtually everywhere. Political interest and news are constantly present, and people are in a constant struggle to sell their labour in order to maintain a standard of living. Ultimately, mysticism allows us to put these struggles into perspective, see the interconnected and ultimately absurd nature of the human experience, and detach ourselves from the immediate struggles of life. And that, in my view, is why it is needed now more than ever.